Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hall podcast. I'm Dan Murren. I don't know what to do right now. The World Cup is over. Wimbledon is done. The Open is done. The Premier League is on its summer break. And for a few weeks, the Pro Snooker Tour is going through a fallow period of the season. It seems like a good opportunity to regroup, take stock and look ahead to the coming snooker season. My guest today is a respected sports journalist and one of the most recognised voices in snooker. For years, he has been providing news, opinions and insight on snooker to fans of this sport which we love so much. Alongside Phil Haigh, he is the co-host of the show that many fans consider to be the gold standard in snooker podcasting, Talking Snooker. I'm very happy to give a warm Snooker Hall podcast welcome to Nick Metcalfe. Nick, how are you?
You read that out brilliantly. I sent you the note and I said, I want this out word for bloody word. And you did the job. I got
the box of toffee crisps as well as the bribe. Yeah. Very nice. I finished them already, actually. Yeah. You know what? I think I'm right in saying that, though. I don't know what to do right now because all the sport's finished and the snooker's not back yet. But for you, as a sports journalist who actually writes about this stuff, is this a good time? Like a bit of a break, or?
Annoyingly, because I like jokes, I'm going to have to give it quite a serious answer. It should be a quieter time, but it's not going to be. And the main reason for that is that one of my main places of employment now is TNT Sports. I don't know if I should say we, but I maybe should say we. We are showing the Commonwealth Games live and exclusively, which starts in Glasgow in a couple of days' time. So that is the next big event on the Summer Sporting Roadshow. So there is no peace for the wicked, really. But I'm not going to also pretend that, the World Cup isn't by a distance the biggest summer sporting event. And as I think I wrote in a column a few days ago, there is a hangover, no question about it. But there's also a sense of relief. And I think I feel that at the end of every World Cup and Olympics, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm a very addictive type anyway. So I will tend to live and breathe. I mean, we all do, don't we? World Cups, let's be honest. But I think, I so intensely follow these things. And of course there was, because as it came to the end, I was thinking, wait a sec, I'm always saying how bloody old I am and how much I've seen of these things. Why am I struggling so much? Well, two things. I think there was unusual sleep patterns, wasn't there? And I don't just mean staying up all night for Mexico, England. I mean, generally, those matches, were, and I'm a night owl, but some of those were very late. So that threw you a bit. Plus, we've never in our lifetimes had a tournament. And I'm in the UK, I know you're not, but generally across Europe, we've never had a tournament in my lifetime with heat like that. Not throughout it. We've had warm weeks, a couple of weeks, maybe 3. But really, for the whole tournament, it was heat that I just don't enjoy. In the UK, that sort of wet, humid heat, day after day, so sleep wasn't always easy. I'm on a massive moan here, aren't I? People,
I like a moan.
People tuned in. People,
let it out, Nick.
Ranting about everything. We are the world champions at moaners, of course. So I've only just started here, but no, the heat wasn't good for me. So what I'm saying is, coming round to again is there was relief when it was over. But what a show. I mean, we never had a bigger World Cup in teams. We never had a longer World Cup in time. And I felt that extra time, that 5.5 weeks, I did feel it. With about a week to go, I had this very strange mixture of, I've got World Cup fatigue now, while knowing that the massive, biggest matches of all are upon us. And of course, with England there, an extra factor. But I really felt that on quarter-final weekend. I was thinking, God, I'm getting fatigued now. This is a long stretch. But as I said many times, World Cups, and for me, Olympics as well, but that they are cornerstones of our lives. They are the yardsticks of our life because they're so rare every 4 years. You can gauge your life by them. They always say that the line is that every child gets a World Cup. I think you can get 2 or 3 if you're a child, actually. I almost count Well, I certainly had two, and I almost had a third Italian 90 when I was 15. I was getting on a bit then. I didn't really feel like a child so much. You don't when you're 15, or at least you think you don't. But I certainly had two as a child. Then I had a University World Cup. Then I had a First to Work World Cup. I suppose when you get older, they all mix in a bit more the same. But you still remember where you were, who you were working with, you know, what you were doing, what the summer was like. And in a way that they are, what I love about them is they take you out of yourself. They're bigger than you, aren't they? World Cups. They're just bigger than us. So that was quite a long answer, wasn't it, to a short question you got
Well,
there? But I'll try and calm down for the other ones.
oh no! Let it out, Nick. Let it out. It's passion is a good thing. I thought no. I have to agree. Yeah, I did notice the extra time and that round of 32, which they've sneakily introduced into some of the UEFA competitions too. It just seems, and I mean this with the greatest of respect, some of the teams that qualified from the group stage maybe shouldn't have. And it just seemed a bit pointless. I'm going to say right now, the worst match of the World Cup that I watched was Australia versus Paraguay. And not only was it probably I think it was the worst match of the World Cup. It's one of the worst matches of football I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely abysmal. But I have to say, I think it was an outlier. I think a lot of the matches were actually quite good. There was a lot of late action. I'm not going to say much about the refereeing because we could go on all night about that. But I thought teams actually, for the most part, kind of tried to play football. Okay, there's one notable exception, and they went quite far, and thank God they didn't win it. But attacking intent from some of the teams was actually quite good and a little bit refreshing, because sometimes in those matches it can be really cagey and really boring. It reminds me of those Rafa Benitez Mourinho clashes at Chelsea Liverpool, and sometimes they weren't fun. They were just wars of attrition. But with this one, I thought there was actually some decent football on display.
Oh, for sure. There was some wonderful football. I mean, I just looked it up actually because I thought, yeah, okay, your Australia one there. I thought they were a bit unlucky, although they were hostage to fortune a bit, only putting one game on the opening Sunday of the knockouts. And it was South Africa, Canada. Now, that was a bad game because that was the odd one out of the 16 games. I can see you reacting there. That was a stinker, wasn't it? Prime time. Awful game. Awful.
Yeah. But it was a moment of quality that settled it, if I remember correctly.
It was a moment of quality that settled it, but it was a proper Division 3 type
Yeah.
quality. It was a bad game of football. As I say, the way they did it was 16 games. The others were in a block of 3, Monday to Friday. But it happened that the odd one out on the first day, and they needed a big gun in that, because Sunday night's a big night at telly, whatever the event. So World Cups and Olympics, you need big Sunday nights, and they just didn't deliver with that South Africa, Canada. But no, loads of big matches. And of course, what really, I don't know if it's the overriding theme, but it's one of the very top themes, is so many stars delivering, which almost never happens, really. I mean, Messi and Mbappe was wonderful for the large part. Erling Haaland for Norway delivered. I suppose from an England point of view, Harry Kane. Others too, a few more of the French guys, plenty of the Spanish guys, of course. They all, stood up to the plate. And normally you'll get either an injury or players just don't perform. And I kind of a bit surprised by it in a way, because as I say, we very rarely see it. And although I think there were many, many moral misgivings about Qatar, what I thought about that tournament in 22 was the football quality was terrific, because players are in better form and better shape then in November, December. So I thought the quality of football, I expected this World Cup to actually be worse. I was saying to people before it started, we'll get lots of slow games, it'll be hard work, but in a funny kind of way. I don't know whether it could have been the much talked about hydration breaks a factor, I don't know. But also, I have to say, bearing in mind the incredible weather issues throughout the United States, and to a lesser extent Canada and Mexico, but certainly in the US, they actually got a bit lucky with the weather. There wasn't that many games where it was absolutely absurd heat. There wasn't that many delays. I think the ones that were delayed weren't delayed by much. So that was a thing as well. I think I personally expected a lot more weather problems. I think they basically, I tell you what, they also got, that just thinking about it now, they got real luck. Like New York was absurd the day before the final. I don't know if you caught up with this. Spain couldn't have their training. It was unbelievable torrential rain, storms. It was ridiculous. Come the final, it was fine. They had bits of luck, which you need, but that kind of maybe improved the quality of the games generally. The fact that we didn't have this overwhelming oppressive heat in that many of the matches in the grand scheme.
I lived in the US for about 7 years, but it was in Seattle, so it's pretty. Despite the rumors, despite the myth, I suppose you say, it doesn't actually rain that much in Seattle. But when it does, it chucks.
Doesn't it? Oh,
When it rains, it is quite intense though. But it's rare that you get.
I
just
thought it was like
everyday rain.
Manchester that it rains all the time. I don't mean that meanly. I thought that probably was a bit. I've always likened it to Manchester, Seattle, and I have been to Seattle. I only know about 100th as well as you do, having lived there for years. But yeah, I always thought the thing was it just did rain a lot of the time. But yeah, I'm happy to be proved wrong on that.
Yeah, it's not that bad. But when you consider, or when you compare it to other places, like anywhere in Texas in the summer, California. Thank God, I don't think they had any matches in Phoenix. That would be the worst of all. But so it could have been worse. And yeah, maybe that was part of the reasoning behind picking this stadium and not that stadium. Were the matches in Las Vegas?
Well,
I
there
don't
were
think so.
no, but there were matches in well just outside Dallas in Arlington, but of course that was indoors, so that wasn't a problem. So yeah,
Yeah.
but you can still have absolutely brutal weather in New York. You can have brutal weather almost anywhere at this time of year in America. As I say, there were some like it because the commentators were pointing out that even though it would have been fairer to probably, well, the hydration break's an issue in itself. There are many of us that believe it should have been dependent on each case rather than across the board. Others will disagree with that, and that's fine. But the thing is, the commentators were saying it got regularly booed, and sometimes it got booed when it was unfair to boo because they were like they were like dying by inches out there, and the weather was outrageous. And then, frankly, it was sensible because people talk about the last American World Cup in 1994. And I mean, that was in many ways you'd almost say a disgrace the way that was held, but we almost didn't know better or didn't know as well. I remember nearly all the big games then were like, so many of them were 5 UK time, which means midday there. The famous Bulgaria-Germany game comes to mind, others too, in ridiculous heat. That was just done for Europe, that World Cup, really. It was done with Europe in mind. This time was more sensible. You know, but again, in saying that, the semis were 8 p.m., UK time. I think, well, people I know in America were like, well, this is a bit unfair. It's our World Cup. We're playing it at midday Pacific time. So again, they did lurch back to looking after Europe a bit towards the end. But that's the thing about World Cups. We haven't even talked snooker yet, and we could talk World Cups for at least another, well, we've done 12 minutes. A good 12 more, I reckon.
Oh, easily. And we've spoken about weather. We've spoken about, well, pretty much everything apart from snooker. It is a snooker podcast, honestly.
It is.
Honestly. Final question. I have to ask you. I know it's not a snooker question. It's back to football.
Yeah.
Thomas Tuchel. There was some outrage. And I would say outrage maybe isn't... I can't blame people for being frustrated at that semi-final performance. I was annoyed watching it. I was sitting in a pub in Copenhagen and everyone could see they're asking for trouble here. Like, when you're doing something right, just keep going. Why change? But you could see, I could see it, and I'm no expert. Surely Thomas Tuchel could see that wouldn't have ended well. And alas, it didn't. Should he... I'm never one to call for someone to be sacked, but he was brought in to make these decisions and get England over the line that Gareth Southgate couldn't get them over. Has he failed at the first attempt? Is that good enough? Is his head on the block? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to lightly push back on the line you said there about, he must have seen this wouldn't work out well, or I can't remember the exact words you used. I think the nuance here is that as soon as England scored in that semi-final, they retreated. So Tuchel didn't make those subs absolutely instantly. He reacted to what he was seeing. So, and another point that people have made, and actually I have to confess I've not seen the first 10 minutes of the second half again since watching it live, but good people that I know that I trust have said Argentina were getting on top then. They were the better side. I'm not going to say England's goal was completely against the run of play, but it was scored by the team that was doing less work offensively at that time, put it that way. So, in fairness to Tuchel, he saw what he saw. Whether he went too far, that may be a question that others will put to him. You made too many defensive changes, but I personally think that we love a scapegoat. This time it felt like it was Tuchel. I think people went over the top, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he should go. I think he's done plenty enough to justify staying on. Maybe he had to get to a semi, but he did get to a semi.
Yeah,
and
true.
I know they didn't win it, and that's must be recognised. But the fact is, it is their best result for 60 years. They did get to a semi. That they weren't always convincing. That World Cups are funny in a way because they are ultimately just cup competitions. Funny things happen. You don't have to play well a lot of the time, which is good for England because they didn't play well a lot of the time, really. I mean, they came back late against Congo. They played well in Mexico, no doubt about it. And I thought they were fortunate to beat Norway, I'll be honest. I thought Haaland did a silly foul, for example, second half. Norway could have won that, and with a bit of luck, I think probably should have won it. Not much went Norway's way. So, not saying they should be grateful to get to the semi, but people have got to look at the bigger picture, really. And also another thing I'd say is, I know they didn't show much of it in the final, but I don't think we should have maybe underplayed and undertalked Argentina as much as we did after the game. I'm talking about the media and sort of maybe fans generally. Oh, this Argentina team. Well, they won the World Cup. They won the Copa America. They get into the final again. Yeah, they're not as strong as they were in 22, and yet parts of their team, you think, yeah, they could be improved on actually. And yes, of course, they rely a lot on Messi, but he's the greatest player ever, so you would rely a lot on him, wouldn't you? But yeah, I thought there was a lot of, all we had to do was beat this team. Well, they're an incredible emotional force, Argentina. They've done it to better teams than England over the years. They may well have come back anyway, frankly. I mean, 1-0 is not an outstanding lead with 35 minutes left. Okay, you can argue England made it easier for them. And look, we can all agree, Dan, once Argentina scored, that was it. It wasn't going to be like, oh, maybe they might get 1-1. No. I'm not saying I thought Argentina would score again in normal time, but they would have won an extra time. I'm absolutely sure, unless some mad freak happened. Because the writing was on the wall. England had too much of a defensive team then. Argentina had wind in their sails, and that's it. But you sometimes got to give credit to a winner as well. None of us are good at that. Which is why on Match of the Day, you're a big football fan, I know. On Saturday night, if Arsenal lost or Manchester United lost or Liverpool lost, it's all, a lot of the time it's, what did they get wrong? Where did Arsenal, United or Liverpool go wrong? And not enough, is it? Where did, West Ham have gone down now, but where did West Ham or, one of the other good sides often, or Bournemouth or whoever get it right? Where did they get it right? And that's what we need to remember as well. There were two sides to it. So Tuchel may have made one negative change too many, but look, to me, he did well enough. And I know it's a bit different than 18 when Southgate got the semis because he got them there, and Tuchel has got the advantage of having England building up that knowledge. But there was no suggestion after the 18 that Southgate wouldn't go on. I'm not saying Tuchel should have a job indefinitely now, but he justifies going to the Euros to me in 28.
No, this I had a segue there. Now I can't think of the segue. But I was going to segue from that into and now I can't remember what it is. Yeah, I'll think of it at some point.
You'll never get that. You'll never get that job on Atlantic 252 you're after. That's one for the teenagers. Oh dear.
Yeah. That was it. Yes, people being vocal about issues in sport, and I've got to say, one of the reasons I listen to Talking Snooker is I think the chemistry between you and Phil is excellent, but you're not always shy about, if something needs to be said, you'll say it. And I hope you won't mind me bringing this up, but now that the Saudi Arabia Snooker Masters isn't on the calendar anymore, you were never a fan of it. In fact, you were actually vocally like, we should be questioning this, or we should
Yeah,
be
for sure. Yeah.
at least, not ignoring it and just saying, "Oh no, it's all fine." It's there should be some sort of conversation around it. I think you might be a fair way to describe
Oh
your
yeah, for
stance on that.
sure. That I'll always be down. I think that Snooker didn't have a better conversation about it. I don't think Snooker had enough grown-up conversations. Why? Well, that's maybe for others to say, but no, I think the idea that we should have just, you know, blithely go to Saudi Arabia and have snooker events there and not have any questioning over it, which is almost the position that seemed to be the case for some in the game. I just thought was barking mad, really. I mean, I just remember one thing: esports, which I know very little about, frankly, had a couple of their very big events in Saudi Arabia, and all the biggest names pretty much in that sport, certainly in the media, were very vocal about it, at least putting the other side. And I think our job in the media is absolutely to do that. Absolutely to do that. And that's what we should do. Otherwise, what we're doing as journalists. And even if you do broadly take the position that you've weighed it up and, you think that ultimately money will talk, if you like, and, there's so much money in it that we'll have to kind of, deal with the morals in the best way we can in our head. I still think you need to be explaining the different positions, but and I don't think we did that enough, really. In fairness, I think other sports are probably not dissimilar, but there were, like I say, esports, and is one that came to mind when I was having a look on social media and also their own medias, if you like, their own websites. There was loads of talk about it, and that was completely absent in snooker, really, apart from, I would say, a handful of voices and no players, really. I don't know why. I know people will say it's easier for them because they're richer, and there is some merit in that. You can't really compare the wealth of F1 people, for example, to snooker players, but people in F1 were pretty vocal when they went to Saudi, and some tennis players and some golfers. Doesn't mean you can't play in it, but there's almost a bit too much, oh, we better not say anything. Well, why not? You can say something and still play. The way I look at it is this, okay? I accept that each and every one of us can be taken to task for our decisions in life. And by God, could I be? No question about it. A number of decisions, a number of places I've worked for, a number of things I've done. You're like, oh, what about the morality of this? What about the morality of that? And that's something I've got to answer to, of course, if people did put those questions. But what I would say is that if I was offered a role that involved going to Saudi Arabia, within my job, and I had to go there, say, for a week or two, which is like the snooker players did, but it didn't affect the rest of my employment. I could have not gone. I would have at least looked across the issues and weighed it up, and I wouldn't have been afraid to sort of say, "Oh, I know my morals can be questioned here, but I'm going to think about it." But instead, it was kind of like, it's just amounted to a lot of nothing. I thought, really, a lot of the talk. It's like, well, there's a lot of money, there, and I get the pragmatic thing, I suppose, to some extent. But yeah, no, I mean, I was never particularly comfortable with it. In the same way, I don't think I'm particularly comfortable with a lot of sports that went there. But what did you feel about it as time went on?
Well, yeah, I'm always asking the question. I get why some of the players are keen to earn a few extra quid for themselves. I absolutely get it. If they don't take it, someone else is going to take it. So I get that position. But I suppose when you hear that there might be a snooker ranking event in Qatar or Bahrain, especially Qatar, given that we had the World Cup there a few years ago, I remember one of the bigwigs in Qatar, when someone asked him if gay people would be safe in Qatar, I remember he didn't actually directly say yes. And then he said in 2022, bear in mind, This isn't the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages. This is in 2022. He said to amazingly little protest that, and I quote, homosexuality is damage in the mind. And I thought, how has no one just plastered this across the news that are gay people going to be safe? He didn't actually say yes. And I just thought the brazenness of the stance was unacceptable. And the fact that no one seemed to care that he said this thing in 2022 when we kind of know better. Like, this isn't 1573 anymore. I just thought it was incredible. And you say that some people just don't want to say anything. That was a stark example of it for me. And okay, Saudi Arabia is a different country, but there are some similar aspects of the culture. Is it a good thing that I suppose that it comes down to the question, does sports washing work? And have any sports washing projects been successful? Boxing is massive. They do a lot of boxing out there. I don't think they'll be doing as much though, if I'm not mistaken. The Newcastle United project has reaped some success. They've made a couple of Champions League runs. They've won a trophy. But every report says that they're pulling out and they will be not funding it as heavily as before. Snooker's not going to be in Saudi Arabia. This Golden Ball event, I think still hasn't been confirmed. I suppose when you see that maybe it isn't a long-term solution, is it good to just take the money and run? I don't know. I'll compare it with this. I think it was during the coronavirus Premier League games. Some of the players were kneeling for a minute in support of Black Lives Matter, and whether you agree with that or not is in this case irrelevant. But some of the fans, they were going to fly a plane over the stadium that said White Lives Matter too. And there was a debate on a football podcast that I was listening to, and the debate was this. And I think it was very interesting, and I think you could kind of apply some of the same logic to this Saudi Arabia debate. As the company who is flying the planes, do you refuse to take the money of these people? Or do you happily accept the money, knowing that no one's going to take the message seriously anyway, and just let them waste their money, but take the risk that people might find you implicit in it? And I think you can compare the two situations a little bit. I don't blame the players for wanting to earn money. And I've said it to a couple of players. If the World Championship had moved to Saudi Arabia, they might have earned £1 million for winning it. Okay, that's a lot of money. Double what it is at the Crucible. If it were £100 more, they wouldn't do it. But where's the cut-off point? When does it become acceptable to kind of sell out? I don't think there is a correct answer, because there are so many factors to consider. But there's so many ways to think about it. Was I comfortable with it? Not 100%, no. Is it the worst thing they could have done? No. But the way the players spoke, I feel it was very trained. I'm going to call him out. Luca Brissell was one of them. After every match, the fans are fantastic. Oh, the atmosphere is amazing. It's like, really? There were like 14 people here, mate. It felt very inauthentic. And that is a problem for me.
Yeah, I mean, we kept being told, how well players were looked after. I mean, I couldn't really give a lot of
pampered. I believe is the adjective. Pampered is Roddy's word anyway.
Yeah, look. All I will say is that you talk about the Qatar World Cup, and I was at the Qatar World Cup, and yeah, there's a lot more attention on football, so you can probably say about football. There are more examples of reactions towards most things, but I remember quite a few journalists that were there took the view, we had a lovely hotel and we were looked after and it was all brilliant. They all were lovely to us, but they were mocked by the majority because it's just ludicrous. It means nothing. I mean, I had a lovely time in Qatar. I remember having a lovely old swim one day in a nice hotel with a sunset, and that's fine. But all that is meaningless. You've got to scratch between the surface a bit, I think. But look, no, the debate will go on. One thing I would say is that, or maybe the debate won't go on in snooker, but you know what I mean. What I will say is that we were told that doors would open a lot more, weren't we? In Saudi, it's opened up the Middle East, and we're going to see more events now. But we haven't seen an awful lot of evidence for that, have we? Have we yet? And I mean, there is talk of an event in maybe Qatar, as you say. I've heard the UAE mentioned as well, but so far, and no, I'm not saying these things can happen overnight. They can develop slowly for sure, but yeah, I would say it would be nice to see some more actual evidence of it growing, because I know you mentioned earlier on to me, you might talk about the calendar. I mean, we are quite UK and China dominated still, aren't we? And they're two wonderful bases for the game. But one of the things was, we're now, it's great to have a foothold in the region, and we're open. And to be fair, I was kind of impressed to some extent with the academies, and they did a little bit more than I thought they probably would. And then it became more difficult to argue, that completely it's just, entirely a money grab, because you see nice scenes there, don't you, with Nigel Bond and others, and that's people enjoying the game of snooker is never going to be something that I'll turn my nose up. And again, I remember when I was in mentioned that World Cup in Qatar, met loads of people from Saudi, the most lovely, delightful characters you'll ever meet. And the funny thing is, I remember very clearly this, they were quite rightly mocking our culture on one night. And I say our from a UK point of view, because they were saying, I know what you like, I don't drink anymore, but they were kind of like, and I couldn't really argue against them. They were like, the way you behave with drink and this and that is embarrassing and ridiculous. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? It sort of is really. There's no sort of countering that. So there's always nuance in these situations. And, when I see scenes like the locals in Saudi enjoying going to the snooker, I love that. It's brilliant. I want people to enjoy it. Yes, as well. So there is always nuance, but look, I don't think there was a particularly strong debate in the sport, and I think we were sort of, people didn't really, buy a lot of that talk, did they? About I didn't want to really get on the crowds thing too much. I think that's too much of an easy one to answer, because not all the crowds in the UK are brilliant all the time. So,
that is true.
It's you go to the home nations on Monday and Tuesday, and they're not always full, those places. So I think it's too much of an easy one to answer. Really, we should stick on the sort of the moral implications really is where I normally would like to stick. But that's the one thing I would say, that I would like to have seen avenues opened up more, in that region, and I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. To some extent, because that's what we were told was important. And again, it's not on the calendar that I've seen for this season yet. So maybe it will come in time. As you say, there might still be an event in Saudi, but the ranking event has gone. And of course, the other thing, I mean, okay, you can look back and say there were two good finals and what have you, but it was billed as a massive event, billed as the fourth major, and it kind of looks sort of naff now, doesn't it? It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Tournament doesn't exist. It's sort of rubbish, And it's not. This is not unique to Saudi. We had that one event in Turkey that
Of course.
I wasn't there, but it looked lovely. And funny enough, a lot of people I know in life have been to that area since, and it always looks like, oh God, what a shame! Couldn't make it that year, but I think I probably would have eventually made it, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line. I'd have enjoyed that, and that would have been a brilliant place, to grow the game. I would have thought, the gateway of Europe and Asia and all that, lovely part of the world. But it did, Turkey's a country with issues. Of course it is. But there are issues and there are issues, and what it comes down to, I suppose, is that every time you look at the sort of index of human rights in the world, that ultimately Saudi Arabia would be sort of bottom 10, 15, and countries. And I know you sort of say, well, how much should sport and politics mix? And I get that, and I get that. Some people don't think it should mix at all, but I think when sports washing is that blatant, and you asked earlier whether it worked, I mean, to me, of course it works. People now think about Saudi Arabia, they sort of think about sport, don't they? They think about Newcastle, they think about sort of good, fun stuff. To some extent, I think they do anyway.
I think about Cristiano Ronaldo, I think about boxing, and I think about Formula One going to Saudi Arabia. That's what I think. I don't think about the journalist who isn't with us anymore. Things like that. I just don't think about it. And so maybe in some ways, it has worked. And is that a problem? Well, yeah, that is kind of a problem, actually. It's, well, do you know what? I love this. I've just thought of a segue. I'm going to go for it. It was in the first episode of the season. Sean O'Sullivan was the guest, and I decided to just wing it on a segue, and I'm going to do that again. So, we were speaking about Saudi Arabia. There was a tournament there. There isn't a tournament there. Well, for now, maybe it will come back one day. But as it stands, the last winner of that tournament will go down as Neil Robertson. And he is on my list of players to look out for in this coming season. And I think that's a pretty smooth segue. Neil's top of my list.
Lovely job, Kurt.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased with that, actually. Yeah. So Neil Robertson is on my list. I've got a list of, I've just made a few notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players. And Neil Robertson is here. And I've just put 4 words. I expect big things. What do you think?
Well, what I think is that I wondered if I was a bit greedy picking 3, and now you pick 5. I'm a bit annoyed because I could have got even more. What I think is you're pretty demanding. I mean, it's not as if Neil doesn't weigh in pretty regularly with going well and going deep. And what I would say about Neil is I remain immensely impressed by the way he bounced back from that. That wasn't just a bad spell. That was really bad. I mean, for a player not going to the crucible. But there was just something about that man, the steel of him. He's like, don't worry, I'll come back. I think he entered the Championship League that summer, didn't he? I know what I need to do. And probably a mixture of all kinds of things. He probably applied himself more. He applied himself to the absolute maximum, I would have thought, or getting that way the next season. And I thought he was very strong and impressive. With Neil, he's so incredible. You sort of think there's always an element of why isn't he winning more, isn't there? I suppose there's almost that with all the top ones. You think, why isn't it, he actually doing even more, Neil? And there's that eternal thing with the World Championship, which is, just one of the biggest mysteries in the game, isn't it? Probably should end up not thinking about it anymore. It hurts your head, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
a bit too stressful ultimately, and it doesn't really lean. And ultimately, you sort of think, well, yeah, how much more can we say about it? It is just strange, but it is only one tournament a year. He's still had a brilliant career. He's an absolute, magical player, really, at his best. He's won everything. He's won most things that are big multiple times. So you're expecting more this season? Yeah, I mean, listen, he will be as well. And he's the kind of guy, he doesn't just want to win, he wants to win the biggest ones, doesn't he? He wants to put more triple crowns on the board, more of those sort of stellar tournaments. Yeah, I haven't thought too much about Neil, actually, over the course of this summer. But I suppose that within that tale, it's more, I've got that total trust back in him, I think. I think he'll be challenging a lot of the time. And yeah, I suppose there are so many tournaments these days, you sort of think, not always the case, of course. Sometimes I do miss out, including Neil himself those few seasons ago. I tend to think that most of them will probably get a pot on the board. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't put one piece of silverware. And if I was a betting man, I'd say he might well put 2 in. So I don't share your concern, but where's your ceiling, though? You wanting to do big time well again?
Well, yeah, I think when I say I expect big things, I actually expect him to have a really good season. And,
yeah.
Okay, last season he won that Saudi Arabia event. I'll get it out eventually. Yeah. And that put a load of points on his ranking. And then he skipped the next event in China, as he has a right to do, of course. But he didn't really... I think it's hard to say he fired on all cylinders for the rest of the season. Did he take his foot off the gas? Only he will know. But he came back from that. Yeah, and I think you're right. It is more than a slump, because it's not just a little bad spell. It was well over a season where he just wasn't the Neil Robertson we know, we love, and we respect.
Yeah.
But I suppose I've said it many times. It is a bit of a cliche. Form is temporary, class is permanent. Neil Robertson is a classy snooker player. Joe Perry, coaching him, he said to me, Neil doesn't need any technical coaching. And when you actually say it, well, when he actually said that, I was like, well, yeah, actually, yeah, that's right. But it's looking about the tactics. Maybe it's just the mental side of the game. Maybe it's the personal side of the game. And when you have someone you trust, like Neil trusts Joe in your corner, it's got to be such a huge advantage. But those words, Neil doesn't need any technical coaching. I was like, of course he doesn't. The game is there, the skill is there, and at this point in his career, the experience is there. You would say he's almost like the perfect snooker player, because if the number of times I've seen him play live in the arena, he just walks around the table with such confidence.
Yeah.
And when he's in the balls, he is pretty much as unstoppable as anyone. He just gets in that zone and he just doesn't miss. He's so dangerous. And it was a shame to see him go through that period, because he's a great ambassador for snooker, and he deserves to have his hard work and let's be honest, the sacrifice he made, the chance he took, it paid off for him, and good for him. And I think he's a great story for snooker. I think, I've got a lot of time for Neil Robertson. Yeah, and I expect him to do well this season. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, amen to all that. You've nailed it. I know I said it before, but I think probably Neil is the human that I most relate to in snooker. Actually, I just have I suppose, a thing for Neil Robertson. I just like him. I like the way he goes on, goes about his business. I understand the chaos. I understand the lateness. That all makes total sense to me. I remember years ago, someone in a sort of authority position, they were kind of chatting to me at an event, and they were absolutely incandescent that Neil Robertson could be late. They were like, but this is elite sport. And I just looked at them. I thought, I don't understand you at all. I mean, life's a bit more difficult than that for some of us. And so I get Neil, and I just like him. I like the way he talks. I mean, no one will ever sell their wares better than Neil Robertson. I mean, I know whenever you sort of say, oh, he's done well to come over from Australia, and he's got this, this great style, and you're right, he's imperious to watch. But Neil will kind of tell you that himself in a great way, in a very charming way. He's great at sort of selling himself, which I love as well. I remember him saying sort of things things to me over the years, like, "Oh yeah, I was a bit ill that because there's no way I could have lost that match. There's no way I would have lost. I was feeling under the weather, and that's so Neil. But you know what? I don't mind it when it's someone like Neil Robertson, because he's delivered so much. He's allowed
He's
to say
backed it
what
up. Yeah.
he's backed it up completely, and it's not quite. No one's quite like Hendry. That's why Hendry is in many ways the most effective pundit we have in this sport, because he can just say what he wants to anybody, and no one's going to say anything unless you're Ronnie. Maybe only Ronnie could. Otherwise, like, well, you're like, what do you know, mate? I won 7 world titles on the, I'm the greatest or the second greatest ever. I can say what I want about anybody. And that is, it's kind of mad, but it's kind of true the way I'm saying it. It is kind of deep down true, really. He has that ultimate authority. And I suppose as you go down the pecking order, people have slightly, I mean, I think pundits can say what they want, but, you can see sometimes that people will be a bit less sure, maybe the less they won. I don't know. Maybe that's too simplistic, but no, Neil's one that will tell you about his, but no, he's a great guy as well. He's very not, he's a nice, kind person, Neil. I've got an awful lot of time for him. He's a very sweet man, actually, and he's a brilliant snooker player. Yeah, he's a joy to watch. It's always that thing you wish you were. We don't really have favourites, but you'd love him to get another one. But then you'd love a lot of players to get another one, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there's only one.
And that's why as judges say, there's only one a year. We talk like there's 4 or 5 a year. So as much as I'd love Neil to get one, there's 3 or 4 other guys I'd love to get one as well. And some of them have never won it, you see. So then you start weighing up. Well, why am I putting Neil on 2 when I want other guys to go to 1?
Yeah,
So
kind of as well.
yeah, that's the problem. But listen, we get hung up a lot on that championship. It is the biggest one of the tournament, of course. But there's loads of other brilliant tournaments. And what I love about Neil is, and he showed it again in Saudi, didn't he? Not only does he sort of monster the lesser players when he's at his best, he can actually sort of, I didn't monster Ronnie there, we won by 1 frame, but he can take on his rivals in such a sort of thrilling, completely lacking in fear. And I think he can, I'm always confident that Neil at his best can turn Ronnie over. Do you know what I mean? And I love that. I mean, in a way, you say so he should with his sort of status in the game, but I always think Neil Robertson can just even blitz the other greats when he's playing well. And that's what I really, really like about him. He's not scared of anybody, nor should he be. He stands up to all his big rivals. The number of times I can think he's beaten Ronnie in big matches, and not a lot of guys can say that, you know. He's done it, and he's done it to the rest as well. As long as he gets turned over himself, of course, and that happens. But yeah, and like you, we're in the fan club.
Well, yeah, and I think Rob Francis is the president of the fan club. He's a huge fan as well, and I tried, well, in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, because Neil actually mentioned Rob Francis in an interview on TV and called him a snooker nerd. I said, "Oh, Rob," and he was calling you out on TV, calling you a nerd. Are you going to take that? But I don't know, Neil. I always get the impression that Neil is more in touch with snooker fans than most other players. Maybe not all players. I don't know, but than most players. And I think in the modern era, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It's clearly not hurting him that much. But I think that shows a bit of the human side as well. I think he's the kind of guy who'll take criticism on the chin as long as it's constructive. And I think that just shows maturity. It shows, a bit of class. Yeah. No, big fan. And yeah, I think he'll do well. I did want to mention, actually, you mentioned pundits, and I thought of this a minute ago. I will mention it. When you're saying that Stephen Hendry can say whatever he wants, and if anyone argues with him, all he has to do is say, so how many world titles have you won? Oh, yeah, that's right. Not as many as me. It was Robbie Savage. I didn't actually hear this, but it was Robbie Savage. And apparently he disagreed, or he had some sort of argument with Graham Souness. And Graham Souness turned around and said, "Well, get your medals out then, son." And Graham Souness, how many league titles did he win with Liverpool? 3 or 4, probably won a European Cup with them. Robbie Savage. Yeah. Okay, far more talented than we would ever be, but it's not quite the same level of success. Yeah.
One unbelievable player Souness was. Could have gone to Manchester United. That's an old story. We won't go into that.
But you're not holding a grudge, no?
I'm over it.
God, I'm on a segue roll. So, on the way to winning that Saudi Arabia Snooker Masters, another player on my list. I didn't think of it before, but now I have. Who did he beat in the semi-final in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, God knows.
Elliot Slesser.
Oh, okay.
Now, he had a good start to the season, and he was really high up on the 1-year list, but he's on my list here. He's always been there or thereabouts, making, fourth round quarterfinal. What should we call it? The Roberto Bautista Agut in tennis.
My God.
He's making that's a great reference, that is. But he's not got over the line, and he's had a few chances to make a final, and he hasn't. I'm going to say the second half of last season for him, not stellar. I think he would have expected more, but he kind of got through on doing well in Saudi Arabia. I've put here, needs to kick on.
Yeah,
I don't think that's unfair. Like, he's an excellent player. He really is. But he's got to start getting results on the board now. And I would say there's very little risk of him falling off tour. He'll be around for a long time. But does he want to be just one of those players? He doesn't want to be. You can see the passion. He wants it. But is he going to do it? That is the question.
It is a big question. I don't disagree, and I think you could have said that for Elliot for the last 2 or 3 summers, actually, and said the same kind of thing. It feels like his results are getting better. He is he's a terrific player, and can turn anyone over on his day. I don't know if I can put a number on it, but I would say that. And don't ask me to name names now, because I'd have to go and look at it in more depth. But I would say there are about 10, 15 guys that would be similar to him, of a similar ilk. And I would say, they're guys that I think they are capable of the next step up. They've got deep in events. We all know the classic thing of nothing's ever harder than your first event, and it'll always be easier from there. And that's always the case. But he's a feisty one. He's a terrific competitor. and he's a very, very fine snooker player. So, it's always hard to put your head in the block and say, yeah, that guy will do it this season, and make a big breakthrough. But he's capable. He's capable for sure, but saying it and doing it is, is two different things. But I tend to like what I see with him. We've had I wouldn't claim to know him at all. We've had a couple of little chats on social media. Always sort of straight down the line guy. He sometimes has some good things to say for us press, which we like. He speaks his mind. He's one of those. And he's one of those I definitely look at and think, he'd merit winning a pot for sure. And when he does that, who knows what he could get onto. And But as I say, I think you could have said this certainly last year, and I think I've heard other pundits sort of make the case for him and also make it pretty well. I like the man, I like the player. So, it would be a bit of northeast success. It's always nice to think about it in sort of regional terms as well. Wouldn't go amiss, but yeah.
Well, in your latest talk in snooker, do I remember you discussing Gary Wilson? Speaking of northeast. And he said getting that first one, and he won 2 events in a season. Okay, ranking event winners, they're rare enough, but those who have won 2 in a season, Gary Wilson is in that list. But to follow in Gary's footsteps is the hope for the Northeast. That's not a...
Do you think when you think of interesting snooker players, okay, I mean, listen, people like me and you, I'm going to say we're nerds, and I don't mind being called a nerd, I'm very happy with that. Yep. I think it's a badge of honour, isn't it?
Yeah,
I own it. If you could name a list of players, there would be a lot, as I say, could be all particularly interested in snooker. But I think Gary will be right up there as an interesting sort of character and a case study and someone that just is generally so fascinating in snooker. I was thinking about him actually the other day, actually, when I was thinking about this new season and the big events to come. He's the guy that will look you sort of straight in the eye and say, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what pundit says I'm doing well. I don't care what players say I'm doing well. I'm just not playing well as I want to. I know I can do better than this. And it could be like a big semi or something, or even a big final. But in some ways, it's really sort of saddening because you sort of think, I don't know. It's funny, someone else very big in my life was sort of talking about the back to the World Cup and just talking about fans. And they were just saying, look how stressed those fans are. Isn't it supposed to be enjoyable? And I remember thinking it was quite hard to sort of justify in my mind. Because I was like, do you know what I mean? I can sort of see what you mean as sort of a bit of an outsider to football and sport. That the way I explained it was when the good moments come, it's absolute ecstasy. The greatest moments come. I remember almost out of body experience when the team I loved have done the biggest things. It's been monumental. So that's what you sort of live for a bit, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of it is suffering. If you're a fan and if you're a player, I mean, Gary seems to suffer more than most. But he shouldn't suffer as much as he does because, I wouldn't say it to his face very often for obvious reasons, but he does often look the part and he wins stuff. You don't win multiple ranking events without being a good player. You don't win one ranking event without being a good player. But yeah, so I remember saying, I think it was me that said that, and I said it was a bit of a funny example to use because I think I said everyone wants to be like Gary Wilson, but then Gary doesn't want to be like Gary Wilson half the time in snooker terms. But yeah, that's what you want, I think, isn't it? Because Jack Jones just won an event, and I said what you really want is to turn multiple quickly. But the history of the game is full of one-time ranking event winners. That's also great, but there's no guarantee. I think Phil may have said, and others say it as well, and other good judges. There's no guarantee, because you win one. Oh, this guy's now going to go on and win 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, they might not. It depends,
And
there's exactly. There's 20 odd events now, not 7 or 8 as there was at one time. So there's more chances to do it, and I get that. And there's more, there's more weeks where it's simplistic stuff, but the big hitters don't play in every event. Some of them play in very few. There are weeks when players are completely off form. The biggest hitters, you will get chances. So I get that, but and the hardest one to win is the first, but there's never any guarantees. So, but yeah, poor old Gary. He was a bit of a broken man after the last Crucible, wasn't he? You sort of think, It's sort of painful to see, but in some ways you've got to respect it as well, haven't you? You've got to respect it, I think. At least
Yeah,
that's the way,
the
that's the
fact
way
that
I
he's
say
so
it. I won't speak
passionate.
for anyone else. Yeah, you've got to respect someone that knows his game and knows his capabilities. So the other thing I think about Gary Wilson, by the way, and I think I said this before, when you're so successful very young, that can be a bit of a millstone. Because he won all these events as a teenager, didn't he? He was absolutely brilliant. People say, "Oh, no, Noel was better than Gary. Oh, he was unbelievable." That can be a bit of a millstone. And listen, every player is different, and there's always nuance involved. But sometimes the ones that you hear them say, "Oh, I wasn't even the best in my club." Some of the top players will tell you that, and they weren't the ones expected to be the big stars. They became the big stars. Maybe that's easier. Maybe they don't have the sort of mental load of knowing how brilliant they were and how talked about they were when they were younger. But anyway, that's long enough answer for this time. Come on, sorry, sir.
No, 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 no. It's good. In my mind, I was thinking another player. I don't know if you would agree or not. I would compare Gary Wilson in some ways to Anthony McGill. So they've both won ranking events. You can see that they are excellent, excellent snooker players. But Gary, as you say, he doesn't always look at the glass as half full. And that's fine. That's who he is. Fair play to him. That's what he needs to do to keep going, then fine. But Anthony McGill, it was the British Open, wasn't it? He lost in the final.
Oh God, yeah.
And he did get a bit of stick.
To
And I
Sean,
would
yeah,
say
yeah.
in his interview, he wasn't the most forthcoming with words. And during the interview, I guess it was Rob Walker, kind of realised I'm not going to get much out of Anthony here. So just very short questions. But I think it was
I didn't
Phil.
mind. I didn't mind that at all. I've got to be honest with you. I
No,
didn't mind
not at
that at
all.
all. I had no
And I
problem
think,
with that, and I thought he got unfair stick. Really, I thought that was,
yeah.
we're never satisfied, are we, as sports pundits and
No.
sports fans? If he'd have been, looking at, and I've seen players like it. I think we all have. They sort of lost a massive match. You think, are you almost not unhappy enough? And
Yeah.
yet, Anthony
Just wanted
McGill
to
is a
be.
broken man. We're sort of upset about him. I want him to be broken. You know what I mean? I don't really want him to be broken. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
want. I
you want him
want.
to. You
It's
want to
not.
show that he cares.
It's not every second counts with Paul Daniels or Family Fortunes with either Monkhouse, Bygraves, or Dennis. This is sport. It means stuff. It's important. Anyway, back to you.
No, but I was thinking
It's your show.
the fact that he cares enough to be miserable. Yeah, that is a good thing. And Rob Francis was my guest on the episode. Maybe it was directly after. I can't remember, but I agreed. I think it was Phil Haig who said it. Well, on Talking Snooker, that yeah, like if what's wrong with being upset that you've lost? Like, no one wants to hear. Well, I'm just happy to be here. Really, well, that's no attitude to have. The only reason I felt that he could have earned criticism in that moment is he's been handed a cheque for £45,000, and maybe I overreacted a little bit. I think I said he had a face like a slapped ass, but of course he's not going to be happy. Okay, but he's getting 45 grand.
Sorry, you just said you may have overreacted.
I may have overreacted. I never let facts get in the way of my stubbornness, and I do think even when he's just receiving his check, it's just a little smile. It's just but that's the only reason. A lot of people in that crowd would love to have £45,000 for a week's work. That's the only reason I think he could maybe get some criticism. But even that might be pushing it. But to be upset that he's lost a match, I'm happy. I'm happy that. But again, I don't want to say that I'm happy that he's upset, but I'm happy to see that he cares enough to be upset. And this whole, just happy to be here. That's not sport. That's not competition. That's not the essence of why we watch it. And but I would compare the two actually because they're both clearly excellent players. They've won a couple of events. Would it be a massive surprise if one or the other or both got to a ranking final this season? Absolutely not. Well, they both made a final last year, didn't they? Gary made... He lost to Zhao Guodong in that final, didn't he? Yeah. So he made a final as well.
So he
and
did.
That was a 10-9. So he was really
so
close.
He did. So he did.
And it was
Yeah,
real money for the British.
McGill, Phil and I often say this. McGill is an interesting one. he, he's a very likable. He's got a very likable personality, one that sort of works for me. Actually, he's quite a funny guy, Anthony McGill. He doesn't always come over, I think, as well as not as well as he could do, but I think maybe the public might have a little bit of a different view of Anthony McGill than maybe I don't know. I could be reaching too much, and maybe us journalists might see him a bit more often at close quarters. I think he's a marvellous player. I know we're a bit obsessed with who's overachieved and underachieved, and I get that, but to me, if you've got someone that's gone deep at the Crucible like that and was on the verge of the final, beaten Ronnie at the Crucible, I mean, I think two ranking events, but one's the shootout, isn't it? I mean,
Indian Open, I think is the
yeah.
other one.
So let's be honest, one ranking event. I mean, one ranking event is not, yeah, for him doesn't. I would say doesn't quite cut it. You know, because he's so good. And I say that with respect for him. He's a terrific snooker player. There was at one time when might have been 7-8 years ago where he was sort of semi-regularly getting deep, and you thought this guy's the real deal. He's going to be, you know, towards the top of the game for quite some time, and that hasn't quite been the case. Again, there's lots of good players around, and it's all easy from the armchair. You don't miss many shots from there, but no, he's a great guy. The problem with him, of course, you just get the feeling that sometimes we all say too much about how he enjoys the longer matches, and maybe that's got in his head a bit too much. And his problem is that most matches aren't long format. It's only when the very end of the season.
Yeah.
If you don't get in the tour, it's only really the Crucible or the qualifiers before. So you have to get used to best of sevens, best of nines, best of 11s, because that's the majority of snooker now. So, but there's no doubt that when you get, you know, what we've seen from him over the last decade or so, when he gets involved in and has been involved in those long matches in Sheffield, it's a match for anyone. But yeah, I love to see him go well again. Yeah, he did well at that Bushish, and that's obviously short format and a funny event generally with unpredictable. You don't know who you're going to draw, and he did fabulous. So he's got it. He's got everything you need as a snooker player. But the problem is, a lot of them are. You've got to beat a lot of those rivals and peers every week, and I've got to get that in my head. That's not me lecturing other people. I've got to remember that as well as a snooker pundit, and I don't do that enough. I know, sort of like, why aren't they doing more? Well, actually, wait a minute. Let's settle down a minute. There was sort of, you know, you look at the quarterfinals for an event, they're actually, well, look at those other 7 players, for example. They're brilliant players. They all want to win it as well. So that, you know, you've got to remember that. Exactly.
Yeah. Who else? Who was it on? You said you noted 3 players.
I did note. I'll tell you which players I've got, and they're all, you know, very recognisable players. One is Stan Moody.
Oh, he's on my list too, yeah.
Is he? Yeah. Well, shall I say what I think about Stan?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I love Stan Moody. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, well, I say who doesn't. That might be a bit flippant. Some people might not. Yeah, that's up to them. You know, definitely they're cool. But I think he's good for the game. I think he's exciting. You know, he's got that confidence. But I would say about him, I'll be interested to see how he bounces back from that Kyron Wilson, you know, situation at the Crucible, because that was a extraordinary match, actually. I mean, so much happens at the Crucible. That's the problem with big sporting events. I distinctly remember having this conversation with someone at Cheltenham about 5-6 years ago and saying that there were 3 or 4 stories that were brilliant during that Cheltenham festival, but because the whole event is so mammoth, they got lost. And we're a little bit like that with the World Snooker Championship. But you wouldn't want it any other way, because that's what makes it so special. I mean, Kyron against Stan was an epic and like almost a book worth of a match all in itself. The dramas of it, the psychology of it, it was an extraordinary match. But because it was early in the tournament, by the time it gets to the end, it's almost a bit of a footnote to some extent, because we've had so many dramas. But it was incredible. But the other thing is, and I wrote a column about on this subject last season. I hope I got it across what I meant, exactly how I meant to say, which is what you always want to do with a column, and you don't always succeed. But that's the dream. Because we have a lot of players in snooker now of a certain age winning, including guys in their 50s and 40s. I think we've got a bit inclined, and I hope I'm a kind person, but I sometimes think I feel a bit killed by kindness sometimes in snooker, and I think we got into the mindset a bit that young players can't win stuff, and can't win stuff straight away, and it's almost like, oh, oh, they're not in their 30s yet. Look, and it's a bit different. We've had younger world champions lately, and I get that. So that's changed it a bit. But it's almost like, well, look at those guys in their 40s. They've got to get a lot more experience. They don't have to. The history of the game is littered with players that have done well straight away. They can win now, especially these guys that have got all the confidence in the world. Now, that isn't me sitting here going, I want Stan Moody to win something in October, and if he doesn't, he's no good. Not at all. You know, it's perfectly fine if Stan wins nothing for quite some time. But he's good enough, and I think he can go, and not just Stan, other young players as well. I almost want to sort of, say in the hope that they do have the confidence, but I hope they really believe that they can win stuff, because I think we got caught up a little bit in this idea of, very young players can't win snooker tournaments, and very young players have always won snooker tournaments. As long as any of us have been alive and before our time. So that's my point, really. It's Stan, but it's more sort of extended beyond Stan to the idea that you don't have to be experienced to win in this sport. You can win straight away. Sometimes you don't have the baggage of being older. You have that sort of fearlessness. So, yeah, I'm saying rah, 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 teenage winners or early 20s winners. I don't see why not, Dan Murray.
Like Wu Yizer, 3 months before he won his world championship, he'd never won a ranking event. And if I'm not mistaken, Yan Bingtao, still suspended, he made the Northern Ireland Open final when he was 17.
Oh God, he did when he was very young.
9-8. He lost a decider in the final to Mark Williams, obviously a hugely experienced competitor even then.
But, was that the year? Was that the one when the year when Williams came back? Like the final in 17, autumn 17. I forgot he played Yan Bingtao in that. I would never have been able to. Wow, yeah.
And he was only 17. He would have become the youngest ever ranking event winner, if I'm not mistaken. And so there are some youngsters who can do it.
Yeah.
Stan Moody hasn't done it yet. And okay, he's 19. But even then, when I say it, yeah, but he's just 19. Okay, well, what difference does that make? I do think, regardless of, well, I know in that interview with Phil Haig, he used the word disgusting about Kyron Wilson. And I think maybe people have taken that slightly out of context and they've made it sound worse than I think he meant it to be. But Stan, he kind of threw that match away. He should have won it. And I would say there is a bit of a paradox here. Stan, it seems, and the impression I get anyway, and maybe I'm wrong, but the impression I get is that he wants the benefit of being seen as a young player. But at the same time, he also wants to be taken seriously as a pro. It's like, you can't have both of those. If you're going to play on the pro tour, you've got to face the big boys at some point. And if they beat you by hook or crook, whether it's in a decider or they wipe the floor with you, you've just got to take your medicine, is that the expression? And move on. And I just thought, yeah, you can see that he's a young snooker player. The way when Kyron was coming back, the way he basically swung his cue at the ball to escape from those snookers, that was not good enough. And you could see, watching it, he was slumping down his chair and he was kind of like giggling to himself, just sort of like, And I think I described it as a moody teenager on the Jeremy Kyle show. And maybe that's a little bit harsh, but he didn't look like he was up for the fight. He looked like, well, I've kind of thrown this away now. And when you've got Kyron Wilson, one of the great competitors, the guy's just won the Masters a couple of months earlier, you can't do that. And I think if that match happened, maybe even this year, 2-3 years down the line, Stan wouldn't lose it. Okay, he might lose a frame here or there, but from 7-3, he's not losing it. But you know what? It's a scar. He'll learn from that, I hope. But some of the pots he made in that first session, oh my God, they were unbelievable. I'm going to use the expression, I normally don't like using it, he was knocking them in off the lampshades. He was just going for everything, and most of it was going in. And he was kind of blowing Kyron away just with aggressive, I call it, this is a weird reference, I call it Ostapenko snooker, because she just goes for everything. But yeah, a bit more maturity, a bit more experience, I think would have seen him over the line there. But yeah, he's got to back up this attitude that he gives around the table, I think.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love his confidence. I love his brashness, and even going back to that BBC program they put out about 3 or 4 years ago when you saw him going around with his dad, and I loved all that. I love the way he operates, and it's funny you mentioned that first session, because I remember a couple of really really good judges, that good snooker friends of mine, they both made the same point actually, which is that Stan was even better than they thought he was, and I think that's how good he was in that session. That we had a look at Stan Moody for years. We've seen him perform really well. We know his capabilities to some extent, but to go out there on that stage and to play like that, bloody hell, that is
it is impressive, yeah.
No, it's so impressive, and
Impressive.
and says an awful lot about him actually. And yeah, it went wrong, but you know what? Well, there are plenty more experienced and plenty better snooker players than Stan Moody that are frozen in that arena. But my point is about that match, and as I mentioned, and it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back. But I think me personally, I'm sticking to that general line about youngsters. I don't know what your view on this is. I think that I remember speaking to 2 or 3 judges years ago. Actually, we were chatting away at the Masters and talking about Kyron, funny enough, and Kyron is a marvellous champion. But I think Kyron was something like 28 then or something, and everyone was still talking as if he was almost like a teenager. And I remember the pundits, they were like, actually, no, Kyron's like 28, do you know what I mean? And everyone's different, and we can't all be, not everyone can be like Henry winning at 21 and winning world championships galore in his 20s. That's freak stuff. But by the same token, you don't have to wait until you're, 34 until you have the experience to go on and win stuff. Mind you, I love the narrative of people that do that, by the way, the likes of Bingham. I love that. So we love all things. I love guys that have careers of 2 halves as well. So I never want to let that go. we want a bit of everything. But I also love the guys that win big and win quickly, and that can happen. It can. I just sometimes wonder when I hear the narrative, because our lives are so dominated by the class of 92, aren't they, in snooker, and those other. And we mentioned the class of 92, but actually loads of other brilliant superstars are in their 40s. They aren't that far behind. Mentioned Neil, Sean,
Mark Selby, yeah.
Selby, quite. I mean, it's not just the class of 92. Many of our unbelievable greats in this sport are on the older side now. So because the winning is not totally dominated by them, but a lot of them, it's just like, oh, well, they've got all the experience in the world, and these young guns, they're going to have to wait quite a while. They don't have to wait quite a while. They can win now. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, as they've been proven. Yeah. It's Stan Moody's on the list. Who are the other 2?
Luca Purcell is one.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this might be the season when he starts playing well again. You probably saw, as we all did, the interview you did with Phil about some of his health issues. They've been a factor a lot in the last year or 2, and maybe we've all been guilty a little bit of not quite registering that enough. You say this and that about Luke, and actually, well, he's feeling dreadful, so why would he be playing well at snooker? You know it's like when you're feeling dreadful, you can't do much about any, in any part of life. You just struggle through the best you can. So who doesn't love watching Luca Purcell? Rightly, everyone remembers 23, and that's big. And I saw one session there. I saw that session where he beat Ronnie in that funny one when he won 7 in a row. Yeah. That was stunning that afternoon. But for some reason, it's the one that sticks in my memory a bit more is the 25 championships. Only last year when I was in there for a session against Judd Trump, and he was absolutely blistering. I thought, God, no one plays the game like Luca. He is exhilarating. This guy's got to get back to his best. He's so exciting for us all. And I just wonder, maybe if he's starting to feel better in himself. On the grounds that I can't believe he'll go further down, I'm hoping he goes further up. Because I've mentioned a couple of times now, I think on Talking Snooker, but also elsewhere, when I see some of these stages that Luca's entering tournaments at, it's farcical. He's so good. He's so good, Luca. And we all have players we think should be higher in the rankings, but, the rankings don't lie. They are what they are. But we've got evidence. We've got proper evidence with Luca. He's won the World Championship. He's gone deep there again. He's won other tournaments. The guy is absolutely phenomenal, really. So, we don't have favourites, but I really hope Luca sort of gets back amongst it again. and like we know he can. That's what I would say. And the other one I've got to say is Sergio Way, who does my head in a bit in the nicest possible way, and not just because I sometimes get his name, mispronounced, but it's more that he reminds me a little bit of Jack Lazowski. And, and what I mean by that is we probably talk about him a lot more in that graph of how much they won and how much they talked about. He's probably talked about a bit too much. But again, in our defence, I think we do that because he's so interesting. And he's quite bemusing as well. I remember Alan McManus, there was 2 or 3 matches last season. Alan was going mad in commentary. He was just tearing his hair out. And
scathing.
Oh, he was. But you could sort of see where Alan was coming from, because it's not just that he plays sort of naive shots, although they are naive a lot of the time. It's almost that they're sort of barky mad shots. You think, well, what are you doing that for as a pro snooker player when you're that good? You can blitz these other guys off the table. He should have been in a world final, and you're just playing some sort of mad shot, like taking a ball off a cushion when you're well ahead in the frame with some, crazily hard hit shot, and just things like that. It's like, well, why are you doing that for? So again, I find him really interesting, but a guy I'd love to see do better than he's doing. He's still doing well, but I'd love to see him do better, and then maybe this will be the season. We think, but again, how many summers have we all sat here and said this about a number of players, and when they do it, it's in the lap of the gods. But I guess in all 3 cases, I take great pleasure from watching those guys. I'd love to see them do well. There's no reason why they should have marvellous seasons, but if I see progress from all 3 of those, and all 3 of those getting good results and playing some good snooker, I'll sleep better, Dan.
Yeah, Luca is the one for me. When he's on it and when he's feeling it, there are very few sights like that in snooker. I even watched his qualifier against Julien Leclerc, and when he got in the bowls, it was actually his match-winning break. It was the century break, but it just looked effortless. It looked smooth and silky, and he just looked like he was swagging around the table. He looked like a shark, like a hustler. He just boom, boom, boom. But it wasn't even boom, boom, boom. It was just glide, glide, glide. He's just so good. And you mentioned that 25 World Championship. He lost to Judd in the end, but that match against Ding Junhui. Oh my God, what a performance. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ding thought that he was kind of showboating a bit, because I think he was miles ahead at one point. But
I've forgotten that.
I can see that from Luca, because Luca is a showman. And I think people forget, and I don't want to bring up the Stan Moody, Karen Wilson celebration thing, but when Luca Brissell became world champion, even before he did the handshake, he was walking around the table with his arms outstretched, like, I don't know, like Gary Barlow in 1994 or something. I don't know. That's a bad reference. But he was literally, physically accepting the adulation of the Crucible crowd. And he hasn't actually shaken hands yet. But he's a showman. There's nothing wrong with that, because Luca plays fun snooker. He's given that crowd an amazing show. When you hear that someone like Luca Brissell was at risk of dropping off the tour,
it's mad.
Crazy. I just cannot get my head around. But he's a human. And if he's had medical issues, it's his business. It's none of our business. We have no right to know that. He has no obligation to tell us, of course. But to see him back at the business end of events, it would really put the cat amongst the pigeons. Not only would it be fun for us to watch, but for the other players, no one's going to want to play him. If he gets through qualifying and you draw Luca Brissell in the first round, it's like, damn. It's like, you don't want it. And that's good.
No,
that's
don't.
Unpredictability. And I think it's a good thing if we can get a decent Luca season. I'd be very, very happy.
So was he on your list? Was he on your list as well of those 5 players?
No, he wasn't. No, I had
Right.
Elliot Slesser, Neil Robertson, Sergio Way, Stan Moody, and Mark Selby. And,
It's funny. It's funny that we had we both had Sergio Way and Stan. There's a lot of snooker players we could have chosen from. Then you didn't give me a number, did you? Unless I got it wrong. You just said some players to watch, so I took that as being 3.
Some players,
but,
yeah.
Yeah. So you did 5. What's the Selby thing then?
Well, he won the UK Championship, but the second half of the season was pretty poor. Okay, he won a match at the Crucible, But
Yeah.
who did he lost to Wuyuza, didn't he, in the end? So, okay, so he loses to the eventual champion. You would say there's no shame in that. But the second half of his season, and I'm pretty sure I looked at this correctly, but this was a few months ago. From winning the UK Championship to the start of the Crucible, he won one match in ranking events.
Really?
Only one. And that was at
Well,
the
so
World
was that for
Open,
you?
I think. He won, maybe one at the Masters. I think he won quite a few in the Championship League non-ranking version.
Oh, because he won that, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah, he wins it
Yeah.
every year, I think. But in ranking events, he only won one single match between those two tournaments. And that's hard to believe. But so in that sense, his form kind of fell off a cliff. But with Mark Selby, that means nothing. Because, well, it used to mean nothing, but his Crucible record recently has been first round, second round. Like, that's not great for someone of his experience, for someone of his talent, for someone with his, I'm going to say it now, legacy. You'd expect better because he's always among those players. Who's going to be among the favourites? Mark Selby's always there because we can trust him because he's done it so many times before. Is it 8 finals? No, 6 finals. Six finals at the Crucible, 4 titles. Like, he's done all right. But I'm interested to see how he gets on this season. He could win 3 ranking events. He could just kind of drift through the season. I don't know what to expect.
That makes sense. Did he win the Champion of Champions for the UK? I think he did, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, I think he beat
So,
Judd in
I
that as well.
I suppose he beat. I mean, listen, he's an absolute all-time great, so he expects to do well all the time. But I think he might be entitled. I think, well, if you win the Champion of Champions in the UK, you may be entitled to have a quieter second half of the season. But in a way, that's not how great champions think. They expect to do well all the time. Yeah, it's kind of barking mad that he's only won one match at the Crucible in the last 3 years. Wow. I think I went for him in the programme actually to win it purely because I thought I'm a big law of averages man in sport, which isn't a very clever way of thinking, but I just think if they keep doing badly, they'll do well. And his UK win was a bit like that. He'd done really badly at York for quite a lot of years, by his standards. He hadn't got very deep, then he suddenly won it. So I'm not going to say he's going to win the World Championship in 27, but I'm not saying he's going to World Championship in 20. Yeah, it's obvious confidence with a lot of guys. With him, it really is, I think, especially at this stage of his career, he's got to be absolutely feeling it. And I think some weeks he just doesn't. And when he's on song, he's imperious and very hard to stop and can win anything. And he's an unbelievable player. But yeah, again, with the number of events these days, if someone said to me, Mark Selby will win nothing this season, I'd be very surprised, I think. I'd go as far as saying very surprised because he's Mark Selby. In the same way as someone said Neil Robertson won't win anything, I'll be very surprised. So I expect him to get something on the board. And they all say, the guys, even the very best one, they say if you win one tournament, that's a good season. I don't know how much they mean it, the very big ones, but that's what they say. So, yeah. But Triple Crowns is the currency for him, I think. I think it is for a lot of guys, but he'll openly say when he got that UK, so another one of those, and not just the Triple Crowns, but the very, very big ones. Those are the ones those are the ones they all want to prime for. But with him, you sort of feel he's almost playing towards those. He's trying to peak for those, and that's not always easy to do. But listen, like most people that in the game, you're involved with the game. I'm not in the game. I'm on the periphery of the game. Like most of us on the periphery of the game, I love Mark Selby. The criticism, I know it's old hat, but I can't take the criticism of him seriously. Really, he's to me he's a monumental snooker player, and I think the guy is a massive credit to the sport and to himself.
No, absolutely he is. In every way, he's a wonderful ambassador for snooker. For me, I would put him in the top 5 snooker players of all time. Just what he has achieved and how he has achieved it as well. He gets a lot of stick for the way he plays, and I think it's absolutely without justification. And I think there are some more prominent characters in the game who exacerbate that situation for Mark Selby, calling him Midnight Selby, and it's like, well, that's because he usually gets stuck on at the last match, and he ends up playing a 5-4 match against Elliot Slesser in Berlin. Is that his fault? I don't know, but I think there's an unfair narrative around how Mark Selby is perceived by some snooker fans, but he's one of the greats, one of the all-time greats, and I would say, do you know what? It's rare that I would say to someone, your opinion is wrong, but when someone says that Mark Selby isn't one of the greats, I would say, explain why. And I'd love to hear it because
no one would say isn't one of the greats though, would they? I mean, people criticise his style, but no one would say not one of the greats. I don't think.
I've heard it once or twice, but
right.
no,
That's
but I
right.
just can't get my
That's
head
nonsense.
around that. It is nonsense, absolute nonsense. Yeah.
By the way, just got to say, how long on average would your normal episodes of this podcast be?
Well, recently, do you know what? Actually, Nick, I'm gonna have a look at. I'm gonna do something I probably shouldn't do, and I'm gonna look while we're recording.
Because a bit of self-flagellation from me here, and you always need that, a little bit of penance and Hail Marys. I think the common denominator in the problem might be me, because you tend to do, I want to guess about an hour, a bit less, I don't know, something like that.
Well, actually, do you know what, Nick? I think you're actually pretty much spot on there. Michael Day was my last guest, and let's have a look at how long that episode was. That episode lasted 53 minutes. Sean O'Sullivan, 58 minutes. Neil Folds at the end of last season, 53 minutes. So just under an hour each time.
Yeah.
There's a solo episode, which I just put out there. It was 25. But there's another one, 47 minutes, 57. Yeah. So yeah,
the common denominator and the problem is Nick Metcalfe, because we're on 1 hour 27 and I'm still going on. Which shows, of course, that I like the sound of my voice a little too much.
Well, you're not shy, and that's not a bad thing. You know snooker. I'm happy about it. I don't mind.
Yeah. Okay, good man.
But you say you like the sound of your own voice.
Yeah.
Well, you're hosting 2 snooker podcasts at the moment, as I said in the intro.
Well, one's not a podcast, but anyway, yeah.
Radio.
But it is a service.
I said in the intro that I consider Talking Snooker to be the gold standard of shows in the snooker podcast field. And that's partly because of you, partly not because of you, because I think Phil does a great job as well. But I think the chemistry works as well. But yeah. I think it's the content as well. It is important. It's not fluff. It's not just reciting facts. It's actually giving some opinions and giving some opinions from fans as well. But it's 10 years old now, right?
No, if you're joking, we're only 6 years old.
6 years old? No. What was the anniversary you had recently?
Well, we had we might have had the 200 episode. We had a 5-year last year. I like the way. I mean, it feels like about 10 years. I've got to say to you, but no, it's only half a dozen. I mean, I'm just trying to think. You raise the prospect of whether we can make it to 10. That feels like a long way off, actually. But if you think about it, every World Cup and the Olympics feels like a long way off, but they come around, don't they?
Yeah.
Remarkably. You always think, right now you think, it just seems impossible to imagine another World Cup. It's just so far distant, but yet somehow they come. But no, listen, by the way, I know I was flippant at the start. I said I wrote it down. I didn't write it down. You are just being very complimentary, and that's very kind. And obviously, my ego side says thank you very much to me, because we do love doing the Talking Snooker podcast, and we're proud of it really, because we weren't particularly big names when we started it, and some would argue we're not particularly big names now, but we I think we've got the mix about right. I would say that we've been a bit lighter on other voices lately, but we've had interesting guests. I think we've had some wonderful guests. I like when we just sort of natural way between ourselves. I think you're right on the chemistry. It's difficult to say that when you're involved, but I think people sort of say that, and I can sort of sense that. And I think I sort of sensed that when I first knew Phil, and the way we talk, and thought it would work. So yeah, I mean, look, thank you very much for that. I mean, we haven't got everything right by any means, but we just love nattering away about the game really, and we try and make it sort of mixture of results and opinions, and it's a funny sort of sport, isn't it? Because we're all so sort of obsessed by it, and whenever you're obsessed by anything, you sort of think, well, sometimes you question it really, but it's just endlessly fascinating to us, isn't it? We never get sort of bored by snooker. It's always like the next thing, and I'm looking forward to the season as much as sort of any really. And I know we've got some nice, nice plans for guests coming up. So keep listening, and I'm really, I really am touched by your words. It's very kind of you to say. It means a lot.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today, and yeah, you've had some really high profile guests on Talking Snooker. And maybe the most notable episode was John Virgo, but I'm going to say, not my favourite. My favourite, Hazel Irvine.
Oh, well, I
Hazel
love that.
she was top of the pile for me in terms of guests because there aren't many people like Hazel. She she's almost like synonymous with the BBC World Championship now. Like she's part. It sounds disrespectful to say she's part of the furniture because no, she's much more than that. She's a personality in her own right. But I thought that episode was, yeah, that was my favourite. Like, you've been around the game for a number of years, but there's got to be something to learn. Even just the way she carries herself, the way she speaks
Oh,
about the
she's
game. There's got to be
amazing. Yeah.
something to learn from Hazel, even for not a rookie journalist.
I think we might have lost what you said there a little bit. Funny enough, which is fun. I felt I sound a bit rude saying that as a guest presenter, but you may not have broken up for the listener, but you did for me
Okay. Well, I'll say it
towards the
again.
end. But what I would say, Dan, is that I am grateful for that, and I think Hazel is outstanding. I think Hazel, she has done other events that aren't sport actually, but I think she could do that on a very regular basis. I think she could do Troop in the Colour and royal events and, you know, state events and even political events. She could do anything. It happens she's chosen sport. That's her passion. But I think, as with the very, very best ones in sports broadcasting, going back the likes of David Coleman and Des Lynam, they could have done anything. They're absolutely brilliant. She's at the top of her game. And what we've got to remember is we're very lucky in snooker that she does this sport because she doesn't do an awful lot. She does the multi event in our lives, the multi sport events, the Olympics, Commonwealth Games. She did a great turn at the Winter Olympics this year. But she doesn't do the golf, which she could do. That was her choice to give it up, to pass it on. So the fact that she still does snooker when she could do her choice of anything really is a wonderful thing. And I love seeing Hazel around. And do you know what? I mean, I know she's only a presenter. She's not like a god or something, but I just think she's a very special character. And what I always sort of amazed by is she's always sort of like, "Oh, how are you doing, Nick? What are you up to?" And always sort of asking me about me. And I sort of think, "Oh God, I can't believe Hazel Irvine's asking him about like my life. Is everyone getting this?" And that's sort of ridiculous because it's ultimately just a TV presenter. But I think for me, because I've always been so interested in telly and the media generally, it I almost take more from people like that than I do from people that would be quotes unquotes more famous, maybe people in the sporting arena. Those are the ones that really mean something to me. It was a thrill, really, that episode, because, I say being a nerd about telly going back. One question I managed to ask Hazel Irvine about working with Dickie Davis on the '88 Olympics, and for me, someone that's always loved sport and always loved telly, it was incredible. I can't believe I'm asking Hazel stuff like this. This is magic. So I loved that as well. That meant a lot doing that. I think John Higgins, by the way, would be.
Yeah, he's up there.
I think that was a pretty monumental episode actually to get John talking at that sort of length about his life. But yeah, Virgo would probably be up there as top three, the late great JV, because I don't think he spoke that often about other issues until he came on with us. We were very proud of that. And, we were a part of that story with the BBC, no question. John said it to me, he said, you guys are important in that. And we're really pleased with that. And he was brilliant value. He was so interesting. And he had us on a string. I remember I was looking around at Phil Haig at one time. I don't know if he was doing the same to me, but he was just every line, the timing was perfect. His stories were brilliant. The people, honestly, the people he's met. I mean, a lot of people have mentioned to me that story about Margaret Thatcher. I mean, but only Virgo could sort of just come up casually in the middle of a snooker podcast with a Margaret Thatcher line about holding her hand. It was just, that's the kind of life that Virgo had. He was next level. And I know we said it a lot this year, we'll continue to say it, but what a loss. What a loss. And going to that event, you know, in Sheffield at the cathedral, that was something that you won't forget being at, you know, because he was just a next level snooker person. He'd done everything in the game, and it'll never be the same. And it wasn't the same. Sport goes on, and that's how it should be. That's how he would have wanted it to be, for sure. But there were 2 or 3 times during that championship, a few of my favourite snooker people were messaging me saying that night needed Virgo, that moment needed Virgo, and I thought it did. A lot of things did. It needed that timeless voice, that special voice to be on hand, but unfortunately, you know, we're just left with the memories now. But thank God we are, by the way. Thank God we have that voice and those videos to look on, you know. It'll never be the same as having him around, and we'll miss him intensely and always will, but, you know, we can at least hear that sort of magical voice. And there's never been anyone like him, has there? Never been anyone quite like him.
I said it was just before the World Championship, and it was after he passed, that I don't think it's a stretch to say, okay, he didn't have the table career of Steve Davis, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Stephen Hendry, Mark Selby, any, you know, that kind of level. He was obviously an excellent player. But if we were doing a Mount Rushmore of snooker, and it's a debate that comes up all the time, who should be on there? I think there is 2 dead cert spots reserved for Steve Davis and Ronnie O'Sullivan. Not that I'm a massive fan of Ronnie. But for what he has done, if you ask anyone now in the UK, name a snooker player, Ronnie O'Sullivan is the one they would name. But I think Steve Davis would be there. I honestly think, in terms of household name value and recognition, John Virgo would be up there. And maybe it's a little bit out of the box, but he would be on the Mount Rushmore. And I don't think it's a stretch or patronising or condescending or just, you know, recency bias because he's recently left us. I really think there's a case for that. If Mount Rushmore ever were to become real, John Virgo would have a very, very good shout of being up there because people knew who he was. Even, well, especially casual fans, but even non-snooker fans, they would know about Big Break. They would know John Virgo. And the fact that he kept going for so many years is a testament to, well, not only the fact that he cared enough to do it, but the fact that people liked hearing what he had to say. So he kept getting asked back. So, yeah. No, I think it's... yeah, sorry.
No, I had the sad task in the last couple of days, and I sent it off this lunchtime, of writing about Kevin Keegan in the past tense. And that was a sad thing to have to do. And we've lost one of football's great heroes, no question about it. One of the great figures in the game, unforgettable character. And I made the point in that piece that I did that for Sport in Life, which you'd like to look at it, my tribute piece to Kevin Keegan, that there aren't actually that many characters, probably across the decades and generations, that you could categorically say characters in British football that people that don't care anything about the game would know. Kevin Keegan was one, because, and even I'd forgotten some of the stuff, you know, researching a bit while I was writing this tribute piece. The Brute advert with Henry Cooper. He did a Green Cross Code advert. He had songs in the charts, Kevin Keegan. And the reason I'm talking about Kevin so much, it reminds me of JV. He had a name that far transcended snooker. He talked to us and me and Phil on Talking Snooker about, he had quite a big name before, of course, playing snooker, the impressions. But when he got on Big Break, the whole country knew him. You know, the whole country knew him. You know, yeah. Used to get 13, 14 million viewers. One of the great lines he told me, as me and Phil as a TV nerd, that on that episode, was that Noel Edmonds saw him at an event and said, I love you being on, you and Jim Davidson. You bring them in, millions. They stay on for me in the house party. This is going back a long time, but it's great stuff. And yeah, his name. So I know what you mean about the mythical Mount Rushmore, fictional Mount Rushmore you're putting together there, because he transcended snooker. Everybody knew. And I remember saying to people during this World Championship just gone, and it doesn't really matter if I'm right or wrong here, you know, there may be someone else, but I can't personally think of anyone else that would have a service in the cathedral like that in snooker. I just can't.
Yeah.
I can think of some very popular people that might get close to it, actually. So you know, this is not something to delve into and think, oh, there's this person. I'm not. I might not necessarily be right, but I thought to that level of grandeur and that level of those numbers and that outpouring, I don't know if there were being one quite of that ilk. He was just something. It's the fact that he was so approachable, and people remember that. They remember he had that sort of everyman quality. He chat to people. The fact that he was so funny, the fact he was such an entertainer, the fact he could play snooker brilliantly, that's undersold.
It's true.
It's true. Sometimes people talk about John Virgo, and it's almost like, he reached the last 16 of the Mercantile a couple of times. He won the UK Championship semi-final at the Crucible. It's not talked about enough, but partly that was down to his own lovely nature. He used to play it down himself. So if the guy himself plays it down, it's not always easy to play it up when for the rest of us type thing. But his playing was undersold. He's a brilliant player. And then to be a brilliant commentator, not just to be a commentator, but to be a brilliant commentator, possibly the greatest of them all, that had a voice like no other, and had that wonderful diction. And what's that word we love so much? You used it, didn't you?
I certainly did. Cadence.
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 That is the word with John Virgo. I don't know many humans with cadence like that. Who can raise and lower the octaves like that? I couldn't do it for love nor money. He just had that ability to. I always say it. What sadly became his last event, the Masters this year, and it was. I'm pretty sure it was a Neil match, Neil Robertson, and it was Neil just getting on the right side of the blue with a really, really hard red going around the table, and Virgo turned it into an event. And I thought that is skill, that is years of experience, and that is the showman. And I'm not going to do it justice with a silly voice now, but it was literally like, can he get there? He's got there, the right side of the blue. And it was Virgo making that moment just come alive in your living room. And I thought, God, he had a skill that was unmatched, really. And every commentator's got their qualities, of course, and they're good and they're bad, but no one's had a sense of occasion of that man. I'll miss him immensely. I always will. It'll never quite be the same. Of course, I'll still carry on loving snooker and love other voices, but when the great ones go, it leaves a hole. It just leaves a big hole.
So, I think it's fair to. Well, the impression I get is that's okay. Maybe not to say your favourite episode, but this is an episode that you're really, really proud of, and rightfully so, because as you said, it's despite hearing him all the time, he would just be talking about snooker, and as it was happening, we didn't actually get to hear him talk about other matters, how the sport is, the state of the game. It's a coup for the podcast, for Talking Snooker. And I suppose my question is, how did it get to that? So Talking Snooker has built its reputation over, not 10 years, half a dozen years. I was thinking of Snooker Scene. That was what I was thinking of. But it's built up a reputation over the past few years to the point where you get John Virgo, one of the most recognised voices in snooker, and probably one of the most recognised voices in the UK, if we're maybe stretching it a little bit, but not that far. But he trusted you to do it properly, and I guess you've earned that through a journalism career. How did you? Basically, I'm asking, how did you start out in journalism?
Do you want to know? Are you asking me to tell you exactly how he landed John Virgo, or you?
Part of that, but also, how did you get him, and how did you get to the position where you decided to start the podcast and you decided to be a journalist before that?
Oh, right.
What was the
Well, you're going back there. I mean, I think it sounds ridiculous that I was always going to be a journalist, but I think that was the only thing I really sort of understood in the working environment. I was always obsessed by news growing up. I was always into newspapers in an uncommonly sort of big way. I was always into radio. I was always into to sort of telly. So I've just always understood the sort of media world, really. I always sort of loved talking about sport. Doesn't mean I was automatically going to do it, but it was always something in my mind. And I think when I first sort of was in the work arena, probably a confidence issue. I did potter around doing other jobs for a while, but always sort of thinking, well, I should really be trying to get into journalism, but I'm not quite doing it at the moment. But I did eventually after a handful of years, and I my route in actually was through local radio. It's funny because I spoke to a few people lately actually that, that I know in the business, and they're sort of they've made the point that they feel like they're, I suppose, how would they say it? They're like sort of writers that fell into broadcasting. And I suppose for me, I feel like the other way. I feel like ultimately I'm a sort of broadcaster, but I sort of do more writing and stuff now. That's just the way it goes. But I did start in local radio, and I started out just helping out voluntary on Saturday afternoons, actually getting results from sporting clubs, passing notes over to the presenter and the producer. So it was, yeah, just sort of very low key voluntary stuff really. And they ended up sending me out to do a game, and I worked for the BBC for a lot of years and very happily doing commentary, reporting on games. And then I suppose from there, I've always been a bit of a chaos theory person, which I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, but and that hasn't always served me that well, if I'm honest. I'm going to sound bad saying I'm not that strategic at all, really, and that has been a drawback of mine. However, to look at it in a more positive way, it has made it kind of interesting career. I have done lots of different things, which I do like. Like I've worked for a lot of newspapers, websites, magazines, doing a sort of variety of things, really. And I suppose like everybody I've had, I don't know if you wanted this much detail, really, but you're getting it. I have had periods where I've been happier than others. I mean, I had one particularly brilliant role, I've got to say, at Metro, and I must give them full shout out. And that's really when I stepped up my snooker, because before that, I was at places which already had snooker people, or they didn't cover snooker that much. But at Metro, I suppose I sensed that no one was really around to do it. For example, no one went to the Crucible, so I sort of took it on myself, obviously talking with the editor to do that. And that's when I kind of entered more the sort of snooker media arena, really. Although I had done the odd final before that. But yeah, Metro was brilliant for me because I said to people at the time, I could work for a bigger publication, I know that, or more, season one, because Metro isn't that old in the grand scheme. But I doubt I'll have the opportunities at those other places that I do here, and certainly not as quickly. Like I was going out to every Open Championship every year. I went to 4 or 5 Ryder Cups, including one in America. I did every Cheltenham every year. These were, for me, were sort of magical things, to be that close to the sort of biggest events in sport. There's a few, I did cup finals as well. I even did a few Super Bowls, which was kind of a ridiculous thrill. So that was a great job. And there have been other times when I've been, but by my choice, I freelance because I think it suits my sort of nature and my character. I have had the odd time I've had full-time jobs, and it hasn't necessarily worked for me. I prefer to be a bit more of a free agent. So that's kind of how it's worked really. I sort of progressed to sort of, yeah. I mean, it's a funny industry that even after all these years in it, I can't get my head around really. There's often no rhyme or reason for it. You can sort of rise very quickly, and if you look around, you think, why have I risen this quickly? But there are other times when you can sort of half go nowhere at a place. I've definitely left places where I think I didn't quite make the most of that place. I don't know why. I mean, it's ultimately it comes down to yourself. It should have, could have, would have. I didn't, really grab the opportunities. I didn't steal the opportunities sometimes. I wasn't forceful enough. I wasn't canny enough. But I think that's maybe why I love Metro so much, because I really left that place thinking I've wrung the bloody J-cloth dry, the tea towel dry. I did everything I could do at that place. That's a great feeling. I wish I'd had that more often. But life's not as easy as that. But but I can be down on myself. I can't lie to you about this, that, and the other. Maybe that's something that many people have in the creative fields. But what I really want to get into is a more positive stuff of what I've actually done, which is I've maintained a living. Not always the healthiest most handsome living, but in a tough industry, and it is tough, and it's getting tougher because jobs are being lost. And the jobs I do, and I do still sort of do writing and sub-editing jobs for newspapers, which basically means, I think most people understand subbing. You're dealing with other people's work and you're putting them in the headlines and the stories. I mean, it's just what we have to do now in newspapers and websites is outrageous, really. I mean, I know we're not saving lives, we're not nurses and doctors, we're not doing worthy stuff like that, and I'm sure people listening will have similar stories about their industries, and I'm not privy to that, so I don't work in them, but I bet they say the same thing. The hard graft we have to put in now, just on a regular basis in journalism, is kind of mad. But that's it. It's only going one way. They want more and more stuff done by fewer people, and there we are. I didn't really want to go on quite that length, Dan, but that's what I've done.
No.
And in terms of the podcast, I mean, I just thought it would work. I had a feeling it would work. I mentioned it to Phil, and I actually wanted it to start about a year before it did. It didn't really. We sort of mentioned it a few times, and eventually we did. But the funny thing is, that episode of John Virgo was after less than a year, so you wouldn't say it was the reputation of the pod at that stage. Maybe it was the reputation of us as journalists. I will take that. And actually, I don't mind saying, World Snooker Tour were very helpful on that occasion. They were very helpful. I said, and sometimes things take forever. You take months. Not months, but weeks and stuff. This one was like bang bang. It was just weird. I said to World Snooker Tour, I've got a feeling John Virgo will be someone amazing for us. I was given a contact detail, and from there spoke to John, and he agreed to do it, and it was a coup. I'm glad you used that word. I heard him do stuff after, but when we had him in 21, I don't remember him talking at length like that about the game and about matters in it outside the actual live play, as you say. His views on Judd Trump, which became quite newsworthy, his views on Ronnie, his views on certain events, his views on the modernisation of the game, and of course those wonderful memories, him winning the UK, the stories we all know, the impressions, big break. It was great, and that's the thing. He's just had again, I don't apologise for likening him to Kevin Keegan. I know Kevin's fresh in our mind. We just lost him, but it was it reminds me of that because they were larger than life, weren't they? They weren't just. My brother pointed this out. He saw a video. I saw it too. That Kevin Keegan said he'd be remembered, I think, probably for three things in his mind: the perm, the hair, falling off his bike on Superstars, and I would love it. But what I've got to say is, what I would say is that it's incredible that someone could name three things, but I don't even agree with that. For me, what came to my mind was David Coleman saying, goals pay the rent and Keegan does his share. And something I remember very clearly as a boy, which is Kevin Keegan leaving Newcastle Stadium in a helicopter after his last appearance. He never did anything by half. But again, Virgo's like that. If you could name every age you are, you've got a Virgo line. I'm old enough to remember his impressions, great impressions. So, I mean, you just can't get your head around it. Some people remember impressions, some people remember him playing, some people remember him on Saturday Night Telly, some people remember him commentating. It's great. So, yeah, it was wonderful. But no, I've had a good time in my career. There are times, as I say, it's antisocial and you sort of think there's no money in it. What am I doing? And there are tough nights, no question. But, at the end of the day, I've had some marvellous moments. And I don't know if you find this. I find this about life generally, actually, not just sports journalism, but general life. I always think when you're in a sort of bad patch, maybe this is my life, I don't know, and you sort of think, well, things aren't going right here at all, left, right and centre, nothing but bad news. Something will suddenly good happen to keep you hanging on. I always find that. It's just weird to sort of think, I was at my lowest ebb there a bit and something great suddenly happened. Journalism's a bit like that. You can sort of find yourself thinking, what am I doing? This is so tough. And then you'll suddenly, I don't know, be at a great football match or meet someone special. You think, well, this business still opens doors that others wouldn't. And I'm still in positions that other people wouldn't be in. And maybe I hope I'm not sounding now like I'm not being grateful enough. I mean, I'm pretty long in the tooth. So, I've seen that quite a lot. But, I am grateful I'm not grateful for nothing like that. That's one of my faults. But I am grateful for lots of things that journalism has given me. And, I hope there's a few more years left yet anyway.
With the Virgo situation, you thought, yeah, Virgo would be a good guest. And, it turned out to be true. But all you did was just say, you kind of just, well, there's no harm in asking. And it worked out. And here we are talking about it. So, I would say that's a pretty good attitude to have just in any aspect of life. If you don't try, you never know, right? But it's the same with the journalism as well. With your career in general, you did a few voluntary jobs, and here you are now, and it's turned into a career for you.
Yeah, I'm a very curious mix though, me, because I take on board what you say there, and I'm outrageously confident at the times, to the point of arrogance. Like I sort of swan around places like Cheltenham, like I own the place, and hello, Colonel, good morning to you, and it could be the most important person on the course. I'm very irreverent, and while that's landed me in hot water probably 2 or 3 times, most of the time it's been magic for me. And yet there are times where I completely lack that confidence and don't have enough of it, and can shy away and can not grasp chances. So I'd be a weird one. I wouldn't want to be a case study on me. But you can get, it's amazing what you can do in life with confidence. It's amazing. I've seen it with people that have what I have, but have it in abundance. They walk around and so what's that guy do? I don't know. He must be important. If you can carry off stuff with confidence, it's amazing what you can get done in life. That's a lesson I would say for a little bit for life, but not one that's always easy to take. But there aren't enough opportunities out there. Not for everyone. We're very lucky. We're first world people with money and stuff. So I get that. Not everyone, but in our sort of first world, if you like, there are chances to do stuff. But whether sometimes it's about a bit of luck as well and being in the right place and all that sort of boring old stuff. But it's true.
Well, do you know what? A positive note is a good way to end the podcast. I like positivity. I can be cynical like the rest of them, but I think, recently I've been trying to be a bit more positive about everything. It's easy to ignore the good stuff, and it's easy to ignore the good stuff and just moan about the bad stuff. But sometimes you actually kind of have to, you know what, the glass is half full. And no, to end on a positive note is a good thing. Nick, this has been a bumper episode. It's been a stellar episode. It has been a joy, an absolute joy chatting with you. It always is. And I want to thank you for your time and your insight and your opinions and your work in snooker media. So, really grateful that you took the time to chat with me today. Really, really grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I don't just want the thanks though. I want the double deckers you said you sent me. It's four bits. Just
do you know what? Those double deckers, they're not as good as they used to be. I've moved to
What?
as I said, I've moved to Toffee Crisp. I don't know if they've changed. And this is going really off topic, but do you know what? It's worth it. The dinky deckers in the celebrations, no. It's the real double deckers.
Just send 4 double deckers to Nick Metcalfe, Hackney, and they'll come to me. Okay, thank you.
I'll find them. Yeah, Nick, thank you so much for your time, and you're always welcome back here. And I'm sure I'll see you at an event soon enough. Take care, Nick.